early on, Freshworks was more a company targeted towards SMB, and it still is. But we really set up the separate segment, the mid-market engine, so as to say, because we saw a lot of customers while we were focused on SMB, a lot of large enterprises also buying Freshworks products. So we saw that, hey, there is this opportunity to go after mid-market as well. And setting up that whole mid-market engine was the other really impactful thing, and also a lot of learning.
This is Sales Ops Demystified, the number one most downloaded podcast in sales operations. We invite the brightest minds in sales ops onto the show to deconstruct the what, why, and how behind rep productivity, forecasting, metrics, and all things revenue. This podcast is brought to you by Everstage, a revenue intelligence platform used to identify risk in the pipeline and score customer engagement, and is sponsored by the Global Sales Operations Association and the UK Revenue Operations Network. Hello and welcome to another very special episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. Today, we're joined by Siva Rajamani, who is the co-founder and CEO of Everstage. Siva, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
And prior to Everstage, Siva was also director and head of revenue operations at a company which I'm sure many listeners will have heard of, Freshworks. So what I would like to do is understand a little bit more about the revenue operation at Freshworks and then understand your journey from there to where we are today. So could you just, because I understand Freshworks obviously has all of the sub-brands, Freshdesk, Fresh Sales, below it. How was the revenue ops team structured around that?
Yeah, great question there, Tom, because I think I should say when we set up revenue operations at Freshworks, we were slightly late in the journey. I think that was also the time when Sales Ops was transitioning towards RevOps. So we set up revenue operations sometime around 30 million ARR in the Freshworks journey, which is slightly late if you compare to what most companies do today, right? So the way we structured the team, and I was kind of managing the entire revenue operations globally. So we had a team of about 25 folks overall as we scaled up, structured around each of the functions, right? So we had folks who were focused on the marketing side of it. There were folks who were focused on direct sales, some who were focused on indirect, some focused obviously on the customer success side. We didn't have product-wise differentiation. It was more on the function that we were focused on that we structured the team around. So yeah, at least that's the high-level structure of the team.
Yeah, that makes sense because the strategy for Freshworks, I think, was, I guess, to get people in on free trials or whatever on any of the products, and then ultimately move them around to all of them to build to essentially have their whole business based on Freshworks. Was that the approach?
Absolutely. I think the biggest part of the Freshworks business was really to try and have intent and buying done for one product, and then obviously explore to see if the prospect or the customer would be interested in the suite of products that Freshworks had. And in a lot of cases, there were also adjacencies in terms of products. So expansion was a big portion of the go-to-market strategy for Freshworks.
For sure. And I'd actually like to ask as well, did you come into Freshworks to set up the revenue operations org, or were you already within Freshworks in a different role? And then they were like, Siva, can you come and do this?
So I was actually initially as part of the founder's office. So I was working with the founder CEO, Girish, on a bunch of initiatives, primarily on the go-to-market side. And I think about a year or so into the role, and just for context, before that, I was a management consultant. Right. So once I came in, I did a bunch of initiatives on the go-to-market side. The founder CEO, Girish, asked me to then move and set up this team for the organization. So I transitioned internally to set up the revenue operations team. I pulled in a 4-member team. That's how we started off. And then at least when I left, it grew to about 25 members.
And according to LinkedIn, there was a 6x in terms of revenue growth.
Yes, and I think now I can talk about the numbers because it's public. So I saw the journey from about 30 million in ARR to about 200 million in ARR. So lots of learnings, lots of course, mistakes that we made and learned from. So great journey, though.
That's an absolutely amazing story. What was the one thing that you think you did in the RevOps function that had the biggest impact on revenue?
So I think back then when we were setting up the RevOps function, we didn't have the products as you see now with Freshworks. It was just Freshdesk and there was Freshservice. And there were not too much cross-sell opportunities between these two products, at least back then, right? But that was the time when we set up the RevOps, we were having the new products getting introduced, like Fresh Sales, and there was Fresh Chat, and so a bunch of new products that were coming on board. And, there was this unique opportunity to really get into the whole expansion part of revenue from our existing customers, right? So the entire setting up of that initiative of the account management teams, the coordination between customer success and account management was one key area. The other area I would say is back then, early on, Freshworks was more a company targeted towards SMB, and it still is. But we really set up the separate segment, the mid-market engine, so as to say, because we saw a lot of customers. While we were focused on SMB, a lot of large enterprises also buying, Freshworks products. So we saw that, hey, there is this opportunity to go after mid-market as well. And setting up that whole mid-market engine was the other, really impactful thing, and also a lot of learning personally for me.
Incredible. And I actually personally am really interested in when people will do good things or learn stuff within an organization and then go on to create a separate business, either based on those learnings or with that experience. And it seems like this is the same story here, because we now have Everstage that you have founded, which according to LinkedIn is better commission software for sales, ops, and finance people. So could you just please tell, what was the problem? And did you realize that as part of your work at Freshworks?
Absolutely. So the idea germinated back at my work at Freshworks when, among other things that we were looking to solve, we were trying to find a good tool to automate commissions. Because we certainly saw that, at the end of the day, all of us agree on the power of incentives. But at the end of the day, if incentives are not clear and visible to the customer-facing teams, and if you only get that to them at the end of the month or quarter, really doesn't make much sense. And obviously, it's a painful manual effort month on month if you are not automating it, right? So, as every other organization, we try to look for solutions in the market. And at that point, we were very underwhelmed to look at what was available, and we couldn't find what we wanted. So that was where the idea germinated, and we thought, hey, why not build something as RevOps folks we would like to have? And then I moved out, took the leap of faith, and started Everstage. And it was not just me; there a bunch of other revenue operations folks from Freshworks who joined along, and so Everstage is kind of truly a product built by RevOps for other RevOps folks and Sales Ops folks. Yeah.
So the current leadership team at Everstage is full of RevOps enthusiasts.
Absolutely, and career RevOps folks. Actually, 4 of them are from revenue operations background. So in a team of we're an early team of about 18 folks. So 4 of them, apart from me, are from revenue operations background.
Amazing. And thinking about a sales or RevOps person listening now, what steps could they take to improve the way they manage commissions, first without the software? And then we can talk a little bit about what the software does after that.
Sure. I think early on, when a company, early stage, it's better to keep everything simple and not complicate or overtly complicate, because as an early stage company, you're still trying to figure out your right go-to-market motion, you want to figure out what the right quota setting for your customer facing teams is, etc. So you don't want to be very complicated in your commission structure. You want to keep it as simple as possible early on. And while doing that, try and make sure you get the visibility out to your teams, right? Because while you are early on, it makes sense to just when you're a 5-member team, 10-member team, customer facing teams, it's better to do it on spreadsheets because it's simpler. But still, try and have visibility provided to the folks who are on the go-to-market side, because incentives really work. They drive performance. They motivate people to push harder. It's important to not only give them that visibility, but also try and have simple calculators in place, just made on Google Sheets or any spreadsheet for that matter, just for them to play around and say how they can make more commissions, right? Just to have that visualization in place so that they know what they get personally if they were to achieve something ahead, and that really also obviously drives performance for the company.
I think this is such a good point. Like I've worked in companies previously where the commission process is like a big black box, and it's like the final day of the month and the person realizes how much they get. And so it's such a simple change to enable someone to see it almost in real time, but then also be like play around, right? So that makes total sense. And I assume that's what Everstage will do if you don't want to use Google Sheets.
Absolutely, because I think after a point, spreadsheets don't scale. So that's when all companies look at automation. While automation is a big productivity improvement for the ops and finance teams, I think the real power of incentives is when you unlock the visibility and use it to kind of motivate and drive performance. So Everstage not only is a no-code commissions automations platform, but also helps motivate and drive performance through gamification modules like simulators where go-to-market teams and customer-facing teams can actually play around to see how they can make more commissions and essentially drive the behavior that you want. Right. So yeah, that's the motivation for Everstage. Yeah.
Amazing, Alex. I'm going to bring you in to ask some more challenging questions about sales commissions.
Thanks very much, Tom. And thanks very much, Siva. It was really enlightening to listen to. And I must admit, with my background, I've very little time on the commission side, so I'll be fascinated to ask some more pieces there. But before we got to that, one thing that really stood out to me from you talking to Tom about your Freshworks experience was really talking about the expansion opportunity. And again, lots of, as you said, depending on the stage at the start, often the big focus is just new sales, new logos, bringing them on board, and then you sort of transition to really trying to maximize the accounts. And then maybe later you start to worry about even more about retention. Can you just give some advice around your experience of how you really, in just a bit more detail, how would you try and drive that expansion model and push that out to the teams?
So I think one of the things was just from the context of Freshworks, at least at that point, was a high velocity business, right? As I was saying, SMB focus. So you had a lot of customers, global customers, paying customers on board. So the first step was really even identifying what are the potential opportunities for other products for us, right? So the first step really was to get all our data in place, because this was a high velocity business. There's just so much data. Just getting all of it together to be able to then start to make sense and identify potential opportunities was really the first step towards even looking at possible expansion. And once we did that, the second step then was to, after we identified the potential companies, the potential products that we could, suggest to them, the next step was really creating the org structure for you to be able to carry that forward. Because obviously, the account executives who are responsible for the new revenue wouldn't be, the right teams to actually go after this expansion, right? So just setting the organization structure, the rules of engagement in place between these teams, and then putting the quotas that you want them to go after, the kind of products that you want them to go after, etc., came post that. And then obviously the third part was just putting the right incentives as well. Like what we did was we also, once expansion, we saw the potential of expansion. We also started to see even early on for the account executive when they're making that initial sale, if they can identify potential future opportunities right then, so that that acts as a like kind of a opportunity or a lead that could be suggested to the account management team, and kind of incentivize that behavior so that they work hand in hand to be able to fully explore that opportunity.
That was a really helpful model. Thank you. And I two follow-ups, and I'll mention them both now, but I may ask them separate. So one is just to talk a bit about, and I think probably people are quite clear at this, but I've certainly seen it handled differently. Getting the account execs to handle expansion rather than leaving it all on the customer sort of success side. But the other one really was your first point of sort of get the data together. And I'd just love to know a bit more about how you decided what data was necessary to identify what solutions were most likely for customers and to really target those efforts.
So I think, let me answer your second question first then. So I think for the data, we obviously got all of the CRM data in place, but like every CRM, the data was not complete, right? Like, so essentially you had to enrich the data further in terms of customer profiling, right? So most part of the enrichment was on the customer profiling, which is, hey, which industry are they? What's the employee size are we going after in this customer base? And what's the patterns that you see, right? After you enrich all of those. So basically, after you enrich geography, employee size, industry, vertical, and also, some data points on, how big their sales teams are, how big their customer support teams are, etc. Then really trying to find patterns and seeing what the common pattern is. Hey, in this industry vertical, in this geography, we see that, there's a common theme where the sales teams are large enough. So should we go and pitch? And they have a very a high velocity model. So maybe our CRM product could fit in well there. Or for example, you see that the company is really large. They have a big IT team or an HR team in place. So essentially, trying to profile and create those ICPs, ideal customer profiles, before that you can go after those potential customers against the particular product. So that's what we did. So a lot of the work was enrichment of customer profiles, so that we can then kind of aggregate them and then call a strategy for that particular aggregate.
Brilliant, really, really helpful. I love the idea of just segmenting and then analyzing the historical data and working. So, and then how often were you refreshing the model? Because again, if it hadn't been a focus before, I suppose my first thing is, well, how good quality is the data we've actually got here historically? What was your sort of refresh rate on checking if your assumptions were correct?
So I think the refresh rate on the strategy itself was very quick, right? Like we rolled it out. We had a monthly kind of check-in to see what's working, what's not working, and obviously that reflected also in quota attainments for your account management teams at the end of the day, right? So the feedback was very quick because their incentives were also dependent on that. So we got to know pretty quick, but once we knew that something was working, obviously it's still data is going to get stale over time. So we had a 6-month refresh of the data enrichment process and try to keep it as real and live as possible for us to then make judgments on top of it.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. And just a point I probably well understood, but your reasons before having making sure that the account managers were handling the expansion process rather than the CSM.
Right. So I think this is a great question because we had a big dilemma, right, of whether to have this handled by the customer success teams or create this new account management team to be able to handle it. And eventually our decision-making process then was more around, at least with the context of Freshworks, there were multiple products that Freshworks had, which not necessarily were selling into the same teams, right? So you had all of these products that were selling into different teams within an organization. So what that meant is, even though there's the same stakeholder, you still had to identify a new stakeholder in the team who could be a very different function, right? And your current champion within the company may not even probably be interacting with that stakeholder. So it was, in some sense, hunting within that organization to then kind of go after and find the right stakeholder and then go and pitch the product. So it involved much more than just your customer's happiness. The customer being whatever customer support team for Freshdesk and ID team for Freshservice. It went beyond that team. So because there was this perspective of hunting that needed to be done within that organization, we realized that let's put this as a separate team who's really focused on creating those stakeholder mapping and relationships across the board, while the customer success continued to focus and make sure the current product was adopted and the company was happy with the product that they were using and was giving us feedback, testimonials, etc. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. I think a really helpful, not just overview of the decision in general, but really the specifics on why you did it. So I think really helpful for people thinking about weighing those same decisions. So wanting to switch now and talk a bit about Everstage. And one of the things that you mentioned that was particularly interesting to me was you're hammering home on the importance of visibility, which made sense. The point of commissions is incentivizing behavior. So you want to make that clear, otherwise you lose that element of it. And then you mentioned about sort of this gamification module. So how have you seen sort of gamification, and really how have you been able to sort of add to that monetary incentive as well with gamification?
Yeah. So I think obviously typical B2B companies, tech companies that you take, a commission plan has a couple of 2-3 different criteria, right? You typically compensate them on revenue, then you probably then incentivize. And the revenue has like some tiering where you have accelerators when you hit the higher tiers. And then you have additional incentives like, hey, if you were to close this more multi-year contract, then you have the added incentive, or do it on something else, right? Like 2-3 different components typically. But at the end of the day, what happens is if the new sales, and with the kind of growth rates that we're seeing and the importance of growth, a lot of new sales folks on a constant basis in a particular team who really don't even understand how the current compensation plan is structured. And everybody knows it's on revenue close, but wouldn't know some of the nuances of the other aspects of the compensation plan, which you want to drive as behavior. You want to probably reduce the churn rate and therefore push more annual deals instead of monthly deals, for example, or multi-year contracts. So you have specifically put that component in place to drive a certain behavior that helps get you your business impact or metric that you want to achieve. So with gamification, what you could do is one, give visibility that, hey, there is this component that is even there for you to go after. But think of it this way, right? An account executive, what if, and that's what we have in Everstage, like can open out their pipeline within Everstage and then say, hey, what if I'm able to close this deal in this month and this other deal, right? How much will that push my quota attainment to? How much more commissions can I make from that? But that's one step. What if they can play around with that data and say, hey, what if I'm able to offer 5% lesser discount on this deal? What if I move this deal from a monthly deal to an annual deal? Right? What's the additional commissions that I could get to make? And really visualize the monetary payouts that they could make if they were to take some actions even before they close the deal. So because then that reinforces in them that, hey, that's the right thing that I want to do, or right that I want to push in order to before I close the deal, and essentially you get to that behavior. So it's important that the behavior is the need for that behavior is realized even before they close the deal, not post facto, once they get their commission statements. So yeah.
Great. No, thank you. That was really helpful, and is certainly sparking all sorts of thoughts in my head about as I try and build some gamification features in, and I've been doing a little bit of reading about it into some of the stuff I'm doing. But that was fascinating, and I think probably time for Tom for you to come back and ask our final question.
Thank you, Alex. Siva, the final and most important question of the interview: who in the world of sales or RevOps would you most like to take for lunch?
I think I've, in the last 1 year, really admired a couple of revenue operations professionals. One's Rosalind. So she's really been, sharing a lot of good revenue operations content across the board. I think she's been doing a terrific job just propagating RevOps across the board. So I think, even forget two. I think if there's one, probably I would say her. I think she's really been doing a lot of awareness of revenue operations as a function, and also just sharing a lot of knowledge and content and wealth of specific context that she has gone through in her experience for a budding revenue operations professional. So,
what was the name again? Just to be clear,
Rosalind Santa Elena.
Rosalind Santa, amazing. We will reach out. She sounds amazing. I can't believe I haven't heard of her before. Siva, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing some quite open stats about your Freshworks journey. And then also the core thing that I really like about what you have brought to the table, which is something you realize at Freshworks, but something you're trying to bring to life with Everstage, is the transparency of the commission. If we can do that, it improves the lives of the salespeople. It improves the lives of the sales ops or RevOps people, because we're going to more likely to hit the goal. So that's the one thing I'd love the audience to take away. And Siva, thank you for bringing that to us.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Tom and Alex.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sales Ops Demystified podcast. If you are listening on a podcast listening application, then please subscribe, rate, and review. And if you have any questions about the show, if you know a guest, or if you have any questions about sales operations, just hit me up at tomhunt@ebster.com. That's tomhunt@ebster.com.